The eerie glow of the gas station's fluorescent lights cast long, twisted shadows across the cracked pavement. I had been driving for hours, alone on a desolate stretch of highway that seemed to stretch on forever. My gas tank was nearly empty, and the fuel gauge needle danced perilously close to the E. I knew I had no choice but to pull into this ominous pit stop. As I parked my car next to a flickering lamppost, the howling wind sent a shiver down my spine. The station's sign creaked and moaned, its letters half broken, spelling out Carter's Gas and Mart. It looked like a relic from a forgotten era, and the place had an uncanny stillness to it, like time itself had decided to stop here. I grabbed my wallet and stepped out of my car, the frigid air instantly assaulting my senses. The building's windows were dirty, and the neon open sign buzzed with a faint, ominous hum. The door's bell jingled as I pushed it open, announcing my arrival to the empty store. Inside, the dimly lit mart was filled with an array of oddities and ancient relics, like a museum of forgotten dreams. Dusty shelves displayed an assortment of canned goods, their labels peeling and faded. Rows of antique toys lined the back wall, their eyes vacant and lifeless. The air was heavy with the scent of old books and stale cigarette smoke. I approached the counter, where an elderly man with gnarled hands and milky white eyes stood. His name tag read, Carter. "Evening," he muttered in a raspy voice, barely looking up from his crossword puzzle. "What can I do you for?" "I need gas," I replied, my voice wavering slightly. "And maybe a bite to eat." Carter pointed to the ancient gas pump outside, and I took the nozzle with a trembling hand. As I filled the tank, a chilling feeling of being watched crept over me. I turned to glance at the windows of the store and saw a figure standing in the shadows, just beyond the glass. It was a tall man, dressed in tattered clothes that seemed to blend into the darkness. He had wild, unkempt hair, and his eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity. My heart raced as I realized he was staring directly at me, a sinister grin stretching across his face. I finished filling my tank as quickly as I could, and practically ran back into the store. Carter hadn't moved an inch, still engrossed in his crossword puzzle. I tried to speak, to ask if he'd seen the man outside, but my words caught in my throat. The stranger outside pressed his face against the glass, his breath fogging up the window. He traced a long, bony finger along the glass, leaving behind a streak of condensation. Panic surged through me, and I finally managed to choke out a question. Who is that?" I stammered. Carter didn't look up from his puzzle, his voice steady and emotionless. "Oh, don't mind him. He's been hanging round here for years. Harmless, mostly." Mostly? My mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. I glanced outside again, but the man had vanished, leaving only his chilling mark on the glass. I paid for my gas and hastily grabbed a bag of chips and a soda from the shelves, my hands trembling as I approached the counter. Carter rang up my items without a word, his unseeing eyes fixed on the register. As I turned to leave, the bell above the door jingled once more. This time, a group of people entered the store, their faces obscured by hooded jackets and scarves. They moved with a strange, synchronized grace, their steps eerily quiet. I tried to ignore them and make my way to the exit, but one of them blocked my path, reaching out to touch my arm with an ice-cold hand. Their voice was a low, unnatural whisper. "You shouldn't have come here." Panic surged through me, and I pushed past them, rushing out into the cold night. I could hear their murmurs growing louder behind me as I climbed into my car and slammed the door shut. I sped away from Carter's Gas and Mart, my heart pounding in my chest. The gas station faded into the rearview mirror, but the image of that eerie place and its bizarre inhabitants haunted my thoughts for the rest of the long, lonely drive. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that I stumbled upon something otherworldly and malevolent at Carter's Gas and Mart, something that should have remained hidden in the shadows. And every time I pass a seemingly deserted gas station in the dead of night, I can't help but wonder what horrors lie in wait, just out of sight. I pulled into the gas station on that moonless night, the sole haven of light in the midst of the eerie darkness that seemed to swallow the world whole. The old station stood like a sentinel on the edge of a desolate highway, its flickering neon sign the only indication that civilization still existed in this forsaken stretch of road. As I stepped out of my car, a sense of foreboding washed over me, a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air. The station's ancient pump jutted out of the cracked pavement like an accusing finger, and the overhead canopy creaked ominously in the wind. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a sickly green glow, casting eerie shadows that danced in the corners of my vision. I fumbled with my wallet as I approached the decrepit fuel dispenser, my heart pounding in my chest, the thudding of the gas nozzle in its holder an unsettling reminder of my solitude. A gust of wind rustled the leaves of the gnarled trees that lined the station, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced around nervously, but there was no one in sight. The desolation of the place was overwhelming. Even the distant hum of the highway had faded into nothingness. I finally managed to insert my credit card into the slot, and the ancient screen blinked to life, displaying a series of unsettling messages. "Welcome, traveller," it read in jagged, pixelated letters. "You've come a long way." I shivered as the robotic voice of the machine crackled to life. "It's a lonely road you're on," it said, its tone devoid of any warmth. "A dangerous road." The gas pump clicked on, and I hastily grabbed the nozzle, feeling the icy metal against my skin as I began to fill my tank. My eyes darted around the station, searching for any signs of life, but the place remained eerily empty. That's when I noticed the dilapidated convenience store attached to the station. It was like something out of a nightmare, with faded posters advertising long-forgotten products and a flickering, open 24 hours sign that was anything but welcoming. Curiosity and a growing sense of unease drove me to the store's entrance. The doorbell jingled as I stepped inside, and the ancient floor creaked underfoot. Shelves lined with dusty snacks and canned goods stretched out before me, and the faint, flickering light barely illuminated the cramped space. Behind the counter stood an old man, hunched and withered, like a relic from a forgotten era. His wrinkled face bore the weight of countless years, and his eyes, sunken and dark, seemed to see right through me. "Evening, stranger," he rasped, his voice a croak that sent a shiver down my spine. "You're brave to come in here at this hour?" I managed a nervous smile. "Just needed to stretch my legs," I replied, though I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. The old man's lips curled into a sardonic grin that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, you'll stretch more than your legs before you leave this place," he said cryptically. I feigned a chuckle, my unease growing with every passing second. "Do you have a restroom I could use?" He nodded, and I followed his bony finger to a narrow hallway at the back of the store. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered ominously as I made my way down the dim corridor, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The restroom door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit, dingy space that seemed untouched by time. The cracked mirror above the sink reflected my pale face, and as I washed my hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the shadows. I dried my hands quickly and turned to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. Panic welled up inside me as I rattled the handle, but it remained steadfastly locked. I pounded on the door, calling out for help, but there was no response. The silence was suffocating. Suddenly, a voice whispered from the shadows, chilling me to the bone. "You shouldn't have come here." I spun around, heart pounding, and there, in the darkest corner of the restroom, a figure emerged. It was a woman, but her features were twisted and contorted, her eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. Her long, matted hair hung like a curtain, concealing her face. "What do you want?" I stammered, my voice quivering with fear. She stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound on the grimy tile floor. "I want what they all want," she hissed, her voice a haunting whisper. "I want to take you to the other side." I stumbled backward, desperation flooding my veins. With a surge of adrenaline, I threw my shoulder against the door, breaking free from the restroom's sinister grasp. I fled down the hallway, my footsteps echoing through the empty store as I raced toward the front entrance. The old man at the counter watched me with those unnerving, unblinking eyes as I burst through the door and back into the night. I didn't stop until I was safely back in my car, the engine roaring to life as I peeled out of that. Surrounded by nothing but endless fields and a starless sky. My bladder was about to burst, and the dimly lit sign for a gas station was a beacon of hope in the darkness. I pulled into the gravel lot, the crunching of rocks beneath my tears echoing eerily in the still night. The gas station was like something out of a forgotten nightmare. The neon sign above the pumps flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement below. The solitary figure of the old station seemed abandoned, a relic of another era. As I stepped out of my car, a biting wind cut through me, and the night air was thick with an unnatural chill. It was the kind of place where you half expected to see tumbleweeds roll by, but there was only silence, a deafening void that seemed to stretch on forever. I rushed to the gas station's restroom, the urgency of my need overriding my unease. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit, dingy space that had seen better days. The cracked mirror above the sink reflected my anxious face, and I quickly went about my business. Just as I was about to wash my hands, a cold gust of air brushed against my neck. I turned around, thinking the door had blown open, but it remained closed. Unease crept over me, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Then, I saw her, a young girl, no older than 8 or 9, standing in the corner of the restroom. She wore a tattered, blood-stained dress, and her eyes were vacant, like twin pools of darkness. She was barefoot, her pale feet ghostly against the dirty tile floor. My voice trembled as I spoke. "Hey, are you lost? Are you okay?" The girl didn't respond. She just stared at me with those empty eyes, and her presence seemed to weigh heavily on the room. I took a step closer, concern overpowering my fear. "Do you need help? Are your parents around?" That's when she spoke, her voice a haunting whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "He's coming." I froze, my heart racing. "Who's coming? Are you in danger?" The girl's head slowly tilted to one side, and she let out a bone-chilling giggle. "He's already here." Panic gripped me, and I bolted for the restroom door, yanking on the handle, but it refused to budge. I pounded on the door, calling for help, but there was no response from the other side. The eerie laughter of the girl echoed around me, filling the small space. Turning back toward her, I asked desperately, "What do you want?" Her eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer, her small frame seeming to grow taller and more menacing. "Your soul," she hissed, her voice no longer that of a child, but something dark and ancient. I was trapped in that dreadful restroom, my heart pounding as fear coursed through my veins. I scanned the room for any means of escape, but there was none. The walls seemed to close in around me, and the girl's malevolent presence filled every inch of the spacey. And then, the lights went out, plunging me into pitch darkness. I fumbled for my phone, using its feeble light to cast shadows on the walls. The girl was gone, but I could feel her presence lurking in the shadows, waiting, watching. As I stood there, trembling, a low, guttural growl filled the air, a sound that was not of this world. A sickening feeling washed over me as I realized I was not alone with the girl. Something else was in that restroom with us, something far more malevolent. I could hear its heavy, uneven breathing, and its hot, putrid breath brushed against my ear. A voice deep and sinister whispered in my mind, "You can't escape." Terrified, I pressed my back against the restroom wall, the small beam of my phone's flashlight trembling in my hand. The demonic figure drew closer, its presence overwhelming. I could feel its malevolent intent, a darkness that threatened to consume me. Just as I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, the lights flickered back on. The restroom was empty, and the oppressive presence had vanished. My heart still raced, and I stumbled out of the restroom, desperate to escape that cursed gas station. As I got back into my car and peeled out of the gravel lot, I couldn't help but wonder what I had encountered. Was it a malevolent spirit, a demonic entity, or was it all just a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear? One thing was clear, though. I had narrowly escaped something unspeakably evil that night. And as I drove away from that forsaken gas station, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was not the last time I would encounter the malevolent entity that had haunted me. The darkness that had touched my soul would remain with me, an eternal reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. As we wrap up this eerie journey, a huge thank you to our dedicated audience for tuning in. Your support drives us to share these spine-tingling stories. Remember, the darkness is always there, but through these tales, we face our fears together. Until next time, keep those lights on and doors locked. Thank you for watching.